All right, well, shall we move into the less wrong posts?
That sounds like a good plan.
The first less wrong post we had this week was argument screens off authority, which makes basically the exact argument that is in the title, that a good technical argument is one that eliminates reliance on the personal authority of the speaker, assuming, of course, that the listener has enough technical ability to process the argument.
Back, remember in the old awesome days of arguing with the religious people in the heyday of New Atheism?
Mm-hmm.
People would be like, well, you just believe the universe is 13 point whatever billion years old because that's what scientists say. And what's fun about it is like, yeah, but in principle, I could go learn all that shit for myself and either conclude or, something that concurs with that or otherwise. But like the fact is, like if Stephen Hawking says that the universe is 13 point whatever billion years old, like that actually is evidence that it is. So it's not true because he's saying it. It's that because Stephen Hawking is saying it, I can trust that it's true, right?
Yeah. I believe the quote from the post is, if something is true, then it therefore tends to have arguments in favor of it, and the experts therefore observe these evidences and change their opinions, in theory. So if we see that an expert believes something, we infer back to the existence of evidence in the abstract, and from the existence of this abstract evidence, we infer back to the truth of the proposition. But he points out, if you know the value of the argument node, this separates the truth from the expert belief, so you don't need the expert.
Right. If I do, I'm trying to think of literally anything I have a sufficient amount of expertise in that I wouldn't trust someone who knew more than me about it. Well, I guess I wouldn't need to trust them more than me.
Did you say sinks, Jace?
Steven's been taking apart a lot of things lately.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Yes. I mean, if someone tried to sell me on some whatever, or another stupid, pointless example, but I had some whatever air duct cleaning done a couple years ago, and the guy was trying to sell me on like some $75 air filter, and was explaining how it was awesome and reusable because you needed to wash it, and then it would be reusable. And I'm like, no, are you fucking kidding? I'm not going to wash something that is supposed to catch like pollen. Mm-hmm. It'll never ever get dry. Like even I know that, and I'm an idiot. So anyway, and he didn't convincingly argue. If he had given me a good argument, maybe I would have believed him. But his argument was, I had a coupon for like a $20 air duct cleaning, and that wasn't enough for him to make a trip out here. So he tried to sell me on something worth his money or worth his time. But
the point is made that if these two things are asymmetrical, because if you know what the authority thinks, you're still interested in hearing the arguments. But if you know the arguments fully, you have very little left to learn from authority.
That's a really good point. I'm sufficiently versed in biological evolution that I don't need to lean on, well, Richard Dawkins says this, for me to have an opinion on something. So if I want to hear his take, it's really just because I'm curious, right? Yeah.
He does end with the caveat that in practice, you can never completely eliminate reliance on authority. Good authorities are more likely to know about any counter evidence that exists and should be taken into account. So, this is more of an ideal, but it's also an important thing to know and to consider that, like, the arguments are more important than the credentials of the people making the arguments.
Seems like a good or important thing to keep in mind to kind of inoculate yourself against the argument for authority. If you find yourself making it, or someone else makes an argument from authority, you can think, like, does this argument stand on its own if it wasn't a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson? And pointed out also that, like, you should be able to follow, like, the chain of logic and have evidence. It just, sort of, like, re-clarifying what they mean by a good technical argument.
Yeah, I feel like this was a timely post, again, explaining the difference between argument from authority and argument bolstered by authority, because this was during that kind of heyday of online argument I was reminiscing on.
Well, that brings us to the next post, Hug the Query.
It was a good little query.
For some reason, the name just doesn't roll off the tongue. Maybe because Hug the Query is whatever. I liked the quote, and I remember this from probably the first time I read it, and I didn't know who to attribute it to. I've been in my head attributing it to Yudkowsky, but he's citing somebody named Jerry Cleaver. What does you in is not a failure to apply some high-level, intricate, complicated technique. It's overlooking the basics, not keeping your eye on the ball. And that's my one-sentence summary of this. Like, just actually remember what the hell it is you're talking about.
Yep. He's saying that, since arguments screen off authority, you always want to get as close to the original question as possible to screen off as many other things as possible. He gave the example of the Wright brothers, who were, accomplished bicycle makers and, amateur physicists, and Lord Kelvin, who did not think that something heavier than air could fly. And Lord Kelvin obviously had a lot more authority, but if you were to get arguments from both of them, the Wright brothers' arguments would probably be better. And if you were just to directly observe their prototype plane flying, then you don't even need the arguments. So the closer you get to the thing in question without intermediate inferences such as arguments or authorities, the more powerful the evidence is.
It's always kind of a fun, just powerful move if you're in an argument with somebody and they're like, oh yeah, what's your evidence? Because you're trying to explain like why you think a plane could fly. And you just point to the thing in the sky over there. You're like, there's my proof. And it's like suddenly, oh, okay, I don't need to follow your math anymore. I can see what you see. Observation counts for a lot of evidence.
And he points out that if you can point to close arguments or even better, direct evidence, it doesn't, the rationality aspect of someone doesn't remember. He asks, doesn't matter. He asks who was more rational, the Wright brothers or Lord Kelvin? If we can check their calculations, we don't have to care. The virtue of a rationalist cannot directly cause a plane to fly. And he points out that if you forget this principle, learning about more biases will hurt you because it will distract you from more direct arguments. If there are biased reasons to say the sun is shining, that doesn't make it dark out.
Good point there, too. I remember back in the heyday of atheists arguing with religious people, there were like the people who got so obsessed with cognitive biases that they would memorize them. And it was clearly just like people trying to win debates rather than actually figure out what the truth was, or like probably some of both, but that instinct to just kind of memorize all the biases so you can be like, aha, that's a straw man, aha, that's, is not really keeping your eye on the ball there.
Yeah, as somebody who did probably memorize the name of
sometimes.
Yeah, I probably memorized the names of 20 or 30 logical fallacies and had fun noticing them and pointing them out. I'd like to think I was a young little truth seeker back then, but I was going to say it's entirely plausible. Let's be real. I was almost definitely, biasedly pushing my own positions, just like I probably am now, but I'm hopefully more aware of it now.
In summary, try to screen off further out inferences if you can, because the closer in ones always have better, more information, and hug the query. Get as close as you can at all times. These two went really quick because I thought they were just, quick, solid, tells you exactly what you need to know.
No, yeah, I mean, it says what it is right on the box.
Yeah.
Well, for next time, our two LessWrong posts will be Guardians of the Truth and Guardians of the Gene Pool.
Not to be confused with anything nefarious.